staying with us. You're still watching OpenExchange. Investing offshore has been a big talking point at the moment, with the rand's weakness and South Africa's low economic growth driving many to consider offshore investments as a safe haven maybe. But with the recent Brexit vote, is this still an option? Joining us to talk about this is John Kennedy, Citadel Director for Wealth Planning. Byron Lott is still at the desk with us. Good morning, John. Lovely to have you on the show. So is this a good time to be investing offshore, given everything that's been happening lately?
Yeah, good morning to you. I think it's always a good time to invest offshore, so long as it forms part of a clear investment objective in your portfolio. I think, you know, one of the comments that we made recently was that offshore is not the release valve and the fix for all things that makes us anxious. At the moment, I think investors globally, and particularly South Africans, are very anxious at the moment, and they're looking at areas to allocate capital, and all of a sudden the offshore advertisers of funds, etc., are a lot more active because it seems to be, you know, the place to be. But as Brexit shows us, and as markets have shown us over the last 12 months, we're living in a very anxious, volatile environment, not just in South Africa, but globally.
Hi, John. Thanks for joining us. I just want to talk about access to information, because a lot of investors are probably quite concerned and scared to invest offshore because they don't actually know where their money's going, or, you know, what the underlying assets are, or even the companies they invest in, what they actually do. But I feel, you know, in this internet age, there's a lot more access to information. It's a lot easier to get hold of annual reports, financial statements, and so on. Do you find that it's a lot easier these days, or is there still some way to go?
No, I think we live in a world where information is much more accessible and readily available to make clear investment decisions and calculated investment decisions. So, you know, depending on the markets that you look at, but if you're looking at the well-regulated markets, particularly in the developed world, a lot of that information is audited. It's well-regulated jurisdictions, and the information that you acquire is accessible. So investors standing back thinking, do I allocate a portion of my funding or my capital offshore? Very much so. I think the information is there and available to them.
John, I just want to go back to what's currently unfolding in the UK, especially the UK property sector. So there's Standard Life, Aviva, M&G, in terms of those property funds currently being halted. And it's been said that, you know, the redemption rates, or investors wanting to redeem, has been a very big factor of those funds now currently being halted. So again, going back to Byron's point about investors being educated, are there any particular asset classes that maybe investors shouldn't be jumping into? Because I think looking at, you know, commercial property, for example, where some may say is a bit illiquid, may not necessarily be a place that investors should go. I'm not sure what your take is on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a difficult one, and if one looks at the UK and one looks at Brexit, I think it caught many of us off sides. I think it was a known risk that many of us didn't anticipate unfolding in the way that it did do. And what happens is that when this flight to fear, or this flight to a risk-off strategy, all of a sudden asset classes that are possibly illiquid, or where one can easily access one's cash, one sees significant price movements. Let's take a step back. I mean, I think when we, even from a Citadel point of view, talk about investing offshore, you know, we have all of the asset classes available to us in South Africa: the traditional cash, bonds, property, equities, the alternatives in the hedge fund space, and other. And then you look internationally to go and find opportunities to diversify currencies, to diversify regions, to diversify earning streams, etc. And one of those may well be property. And one of those, when one allocates capital to property or equities, one takes a view in terms of time horizon. And then one gets, unfortunately, sucked into the short-term noise that happens, you know, as what's happened in the past month, etc. And I think the main emphasis going forward from investors is try and protect your capital by not making irrational decisions and being forced to make short-term decisions, and let prices settle down. But at the moment, there just seems to be so much dust at the moment that if you're forced into making a short-term decision because you are liquid or you're trying to get your money, you're going to realize some losses in the current environment.
Do you not feel, John, that often, markets overreact to things, such as Brexit, these unknown unknowns and unexpected events? And possibly this is a good opportunity to be taking advantage of a weaker pound, and there definitely are, buying opportunities in the UK. But at the same time, the rand's also strengthened to the US dollar. So, this could be a decent opportunity if you are liquid in South African rands to get some money offshore.
Very much so. I mean, if you were the South African that took your money out at the start of the year, from a currency point of view, you're playing a little bit of catch-up, because we've seen the rand being stronger off the back of a much weaker 2015, obviously. But if you're in the position now as an investor with cash, and offshore makes sense in terms of your bigger context or your bigger portfolio, and you are possibly slightly contrarian and you're buying pounds at a much weaker level than it was, certainly, we flat on the pound on a one-year basis. It's hard to believe. So we had a weakening, dramatic weakening through 2015, and we flat year on year up until the end of June. And there may well be assets in the UK that present opportunity, and certainly in the US as well, off the back of a weaker global market. There's no doubt about that. But once again, I wouldn't be allocating capital offshore if your time horizon is a 6-month view or 12-month view, or a 2-year view. I think offshore investing is very much part of the medium to long-term part of South African investors' capital allocation. Because in the near term, it's extremely difficult to anticipate how Brexit will unfold, how the US election and politics will unfold. There's just too many. There are known variables that that we're facing that are risky, and there are too many unknowns to take too short-term a view.
John, you mentioned the UK, the US also as a possible place where you could invest. Long term, what is your feeling on the China story?
Can I have an easier question? It's such a difficult question to answer, to be honest with you. On a one-year basis, the Chinese market's taken quite a knock. I think, just demographically-wise, geographically-wise, and economic contribution, the world needs a strong China. China's economy, 15% of world GDP. We need China to succeed, and they are an intricate part of the South African economy in terms of their demand for our raw materials. From an investing point of view, I'd like to plead the fifth. I'm not familiar too much with that Chinese market, and typically when we at Citadel look for opportunities, we look more for in the European, UK, North American space, where we can find stocks there or investments there that can participate in the Chinese economy without being buying directly in that market. But just from a geographic, a global perspective, the world needs China. The world needs China to have strong, enduring, sustainable growth. The world needs China to move from sort of the production infrastructure economy to more of a consumption-driven economy. That is not something that happens overnight. That is part of the changing of the underlying structures within China. We need that positive momentum cycle to come through. And Chinese growth is a strong necessity in the world where we stand at the moment.
John, that's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and giving us your insights regarding offshore investing. Very big thank you to John Kennedy, a Citadel Director for Wealth Planning. Do stay with us. When we come back, we'll be talking about intra-regional trade on the African continent.